Hi everyone, welcome to the Building Bites podcast. So Building Bites is about discussions, going on in the tech ecosystem in Ghana, where we have a major issue for every week we are addressing, not necessarily issues, sometimes solutions and interesting discussions. Alongside, we share what's happening in tech and we round off with opportunities in tech. So if you are looking to be updated on what's happening in tech, then this is the best place. If you are looking for opportunities, this is the best place. And if you want to have some good time listening to conversations happening in tech, then Building Bites podcast should be the one you should be on. And today, I'm here myself, Caleb Lamte, and
Poga Kofi.
Yao Enchiusu.
and we have a special guest today. He's by the name.
Of Josiah Eyison, CEO and co-founder of iSpace.
All right, so if you don't know, iSpace is one of the, or has been, and is still one of the leading tech hubs in Ghana. Personally, I've gotten experience working in an iSpace environment. I've not told Josiah that, so he doesn't know about. I know if he knows of one agric firm run by a lady called Cynthia. You know Cynthia. So I worked with them for some time.
Okay.
Because we met through the Ghana Climate Innovation Center. And
Right.
Cynthia was the first person who introduced me to iSpace. So
Trustees Farms, right?
Trustees Farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I visited iSpace. I was like, oh, nice. I had never been here before. And that was like 2018, 2019, thereabouts. Yeah. So it's nice, see you having you on the podcast in person. Today we are talking about the role of hubs in Ghana, or the role of tech hubs in Ghana in the startup ecosystem. In our earlier season, we had a discussion on that, just the three of us, myself, Foga, and Yao. But today we are glad, excited, happy to have Josiah here.
The experts.
The experts on it. Because I know people in that earlier season, people mentioned we're hard on the hubs. They felt we were very critical of them. I think sometimes it stems from the point that we are also more of like entrepreneurs. We've not been like in the hub space or the hub manager, so we can't appreciate the perspective well. And that's why having you here, Josiah, it's a great one. So to start with, Josiah is the co-founder or the founder. The founder.
Yeah, co-founder.
And the founder of iSpace has been running iSpace for almost more than
11 years now.
11 years now.
It's like a prison sentence.
11 years now. So, most people, I'm not sure those listening, you've had the relationships last for 11 years, but that's just by the way. So, I'll just briefly introduce the Ghanaian Tech ecosystem, and we dive in straight into the conversations. So, I'm going to read a short highlights from the US Trade Office talking about the Ghanaian Tech Hubs. So I read, it says, Ghana ranks highly among African countries for ICT use. There's a vibrant and geographical dispersed startup ecosystem that is developing solutions across numerous sectors. There are more than 100 tech hubs and accelerators spread across Ghana with a concentration in Ghana's three biggest cities, Accra, Tema, Kumasi, and Takoradi. There are notable hubs in these regions. Among them are MEST, Impact Hub, Cosmos Innovation Center, Node 8, and I'm adding this one myself, iSpace, if you don't say the iSpace.
I'm surprised we're not there.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Really? But
Yeah, because when I saw Node 8, there was
how they move. Yeah, but anyway, that's a different conversation. But yeah.
So it says there are also several dedicated business chambers, including the Ghana Chambers of Young Entrepreneurs, the Ghana Hubs Network, the Ghana Startup Network, among others. And I think you are the president for the
Ghana Hubs Network.
Ghana Hubs Network.
So yes, exactly. How are you going to... Anyway, proceed.
So the other things, talking about their programs, their challenges and all that, but we'll not move there. We just want to kickstart the conversation from here. And what's the growing importance of hubs in fostering innovation and entrepreneurship? Maybe I want to start for us as entrepreneurs before we come to the expertise. So
I believe in the hub, when you get into a hub, they aren't just designers, they aren't just developers, they aren't just people with brilliant ideas.
Yeah.
Almost everybody is there.
Yeah.
We meet together. We have one place, unified place we can all go.
Yeah.
Meet together, test ideas. We also have people who have done it before.
Yeah.
And then test ideas and make it work. I think for it being a place where young people with ideas and who can do stuff can meet, for that alone, I think is very important in our ecosystem. And I think it's good we have Josiah because one, I want to know how it was like when there was no hub in Ghana. How was that like? And then how was it? I just want to know how that was like when there was no hub in Ghana. How are things running? I mean, where people who wanted to do tech, who were very new to it, how were they assessing knowledge, assessing the community? Well, I think in the early days, the community was very, very important. Was very important in driving what we know now. That we know people are raising money left, right, center.
Yeah. Okay. So, Josiah, we'll come to you with that question. Poga, how's Hubs fostered innovation in
Yeah,
entrepreneurship?
I think hubs are like think if if you take like startup as a seedling, hubs are like the greenhouse, that provide the optimal conditions for these seedlings to grow and become healthy plants. So they are very important. They provide a lot of stuff. I mean, you could find your co-founders there. They could help you to set up your company, which is very important. They could help you in developing your business structure and all of those finding investments. Helps provide all these things. I think also especially the community that's helps create are very important to the growth of companies and the startup ecosystem at large. So they are very strategic and important elements in the startup ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, same. I think Hubs were the first group of places I found like things like startups happening. Apart from reading it online, because sometimes when you read it online, now you have to find a way to connect it on the ground. So how do you connect on the ground? And that is where Hubs opened that door for me. Because if I hadn't got introduced to certain hubs, I would have never thought like even there are tech companies in Ghana. I never knew tech was run by younger people and all that. Maybe Zuckerberg would have been like still a mystical person to me until I got involved in Hubs. So Hubs really shape. I mean, once journey in tech startups. I don't know about maybe other kind of industries, but I know for tech startups, Hubs have been very instrumental there.
Tech careers.
Yeah, tech careers as well. Yeah, so not just for entrepreneurship startups, even the careers that
Careers.
came out of it. Because I mean, where are you going to do what we call product design? Where was product manager? I mean, who is that? What do you understand even by a founder? I think it was tech that brought some of the things out because those times we used to call those who start companies maybe MD because that's what our parents knew. Yeah, is an MD, is an MD, our best CEO. But nobody called anyone like really a founder. Nobody because we all assume we are inheriting these things from somewhere, but Hubs have really shaped us there. And for you, Josiah, what happened? How did you get into this whole house space?
So I think it was some sin that I committed in my past life or something. I don't know. They just jumped, get dropped in. So we go back to 2011, right? I'm in the UK, and one of my friends calls and says, okay, they want to organize an event for entrepreneurs, so people that create mobile apps and all of these other things. And bear in mind, I'm a corporate person, so I'm the business side of tech, not the development tech, right? And so the idea was just come down, have the event, and then see what happens. So at that time, there were no hubs, as you call it. And so I came down 2011. We then naturally put it out and then do mobile apps Ghana at that time, where we had the likes of Seya Mobile, Nandi Mobile, and then we had Farmerline. So they came third, Farmerline came third, Seya won, and then Nandi Mobile. So we gave money to all of these other people, right? And then, so the conversation then after that was, hold on, we need a space for people to kind of come together to work. And bear in mind, the only person that comes out of, or the three that I mentioned, was Farmerline that was outside of the MEST cluster.
Yeah.
So MEST was one of the first incubators. They were never a hub because hub is a place where everybody goes to connect.
Yeah.
Right? But whereas MEST was just an incubator where they brought their own people. So naturally, they were not classified as a hub. And again, as we know in Ghana, renting a place was expensive because you have to pay 3 years in advance and all of these other things. And at that time, getting a space was costing about $3,000 a month, right? And then the internet and all of these other things. So the idea was, okay, get a space, bring all of these people together. But I think where we made a mistake was the fact that we assumed that developers were entrepreneurs, right? And that's where the startup comes in,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
But we can talk about that in a minute. And so when the space was open, bring the developers in, and that's where you had a room full of developers.
Yeah.
Right? And the thing that you talked about, where were these people coming from? So rest in peace to two people, Guido and Emmanuel Ochi, right? They were almost like the first people to kind of form these developer groups. Okay. So you saw the first creation of the Python groups and the Google developer groups and all of these. So they used to meet at homes. And you know how technical people are very introverted.
Yeah.
So they just kind of meet by themselves in groups and all of these other things. So coming into hubs was kind of new to them. Again, when you do events, it would just be them in the space. They didn't have a clue on graphic designers, what mock-ups were and all of these other things, because they were just coding blind. You have an idea and you just code. Then, again, product developers and all of these other things. So for us, when we first started, those skill sets were never in place. It was our job to kind of put all of that in place. So Ghana's introduction to this whole hub space started with developers just kind of meeting themselves. So you had Ghana Think and all of these other people that would bring developers together. So our industry was more developer driven than entrepreneurial driven, right? But now we're kind of in a different space with that. So yeah, I mean, that's for us, that's what the whole genesis was. So for us, 2011, 12, 13, none of that. It was Impact Hub was Hub Accra, and then they changed into Impact Hub. So it was iSpace Impact Hub, or shall I say Hub Accra, were the only two hubs in Accra, generally speaking. And then they changed into Impact Hub, so we became the only ones that was indigenous, right? So we were the only people that, I would say, Ghanaian owned, run and everything else. But yeah, I mean, but now, I mean, there's over 100 of hubs spread across.
Hundreds of them. So, Avi, how you've mentioned clearly that it was driven by developers, and in all sincerity, did you see success there, or success came when it became a mixture of people? I know, yes, times have changed, but sincerely comparing, do you think developers were more impactful in this house? They created more value for this house, or when the others came in and there was a mix-up of business and designers and all those things, then the hubs really got together well?
This is a great question. So I think developers were benefiting from the pitchpreneur mentality, right? Because back in the day, developers would do hackathons, they would create something, win the pitch, get the money, spend it, don't have to create a product, right? And everybody was cool because people didn't even have the idea of, let me even launch this product. How am I going to launch this product? Product life cycle. Nobody talked about that. So you just do 1, 2 code, you show it online, you pitch, and then you win the money, and then that's it. Nothing happened. But it was when the structure came in, that's when you saw that people started building businesses, right? Figured out, okay, now we need to register our business. Now we need to launch a product. How would that work? We need these kind of people to be working in our company, because UI, UX, front end, back end. Because back in the day, most of developers did everything. We just front end. Most of it was just front end.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Front end
really
to pitch.
Doesn't work. It was front end to pitch. That was it. It was nothing else. I'm glad you saying it rather than me, because and it was it was just front end to pitch. It was never back end to create a product, to really develop a product. Because for me, back end people are the ones that create the product life cycle. They're the ones that will go through the whole process. But then it was just the front end guys would just create a nice looking thing and just win a pitch, and that was it. But now, after that, that's when the structure came in. So that's when all these other skill sets came in, where we now understand what a business development person is, right? A graphic designer and somebody that would, even from a social media point of view and all of these things, you realize that that's what a startup then becomes. And when you were talking about parents with the titles that we had, CEOs, and you had two friends that will call themselves CEO and CTO. And then you think, just hold up a second. CTO, that's a chief technical officer or technology officer.
Yeah.
First of all, you don't have a technology. So how are you the chief technology officer
you don't
for
even have
this
the
two of
people,
you?
so what
right?
makes you a chief?
Yeah, because the chief is supposed to be person that looks after a community,
Yeah,
all of the
community,
people.
yeah.
But it's just you and your business partner.
Yeah.
Right? And so that was problematic
Yeah.
for us. It's just trying to rein in that mentality and moving them from just pitching to just win money to now where we have a little bit of structure. So I think we were successful in winning pitches, but we're much more successful now in building businesses.
Wow.
And I think that's where we're moving to.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's really insightful, because I mean we are all MEST alumni,
Right.
And one of the things I think, maybe I don't know whether we learned it before MEST or in MEST we came in with that attitude, was that somehow we had all built the pitchpreneur businesses, businesses that has like nice front end, nice mock-up. You win the promotion or whatever, you win the hackathon, then the business, the product or the project ends there.
Right.
You take the money, you spend it. But I think most people got to realize they wanted to really build businesses. And sometimes you realize, okay, I'm a technical person. I mean, I don't have a solid business background, so I need an environment where I can connect with other people. Some of us realize that we're business people. We don't enjoy the tech. We don't see ourselves even doing the tech. Why don't we join a community and get, some of these tech people coming in? So I think that is a key thing for anyone maybe listening who is thinking of being an entrepreneur or something. Separate the pitch business from the real business.
Yeah. Yeah. It is real. I mean, you're gonna hear the Black Stars analogies a lot, right? And I hope you permit me to do that, to separate the pitch business from the real business. Our love for the Black Stars is based on history and things, the players of old, and that's the pitch. That is what you pitch for us to wear the jersey. But when you get on the pitch, it's exactly opposite to what we get, right? Because running a business is serious.
Yeah, it's serious.
It takes a lot of brain power to do that. And Ghana's problem has always been the fact that the developers were the rock stars,
Yep.
right?
Yep, yeah.
But in reality, when you think about business, right? Like even we're looking at this table, the product is actually 1% of the business.
Yeah.
Because a good product with a bad business sense will fail.
Yeah.
But a bad product with good business sense would win
Yeah.
any single day.
Yeah.
Right? Any single day. And because we've not really kind of homed in on that, we kind of made the developers the rock stars. And that's why you had situations where we focused a lot on the front end stuff and never really had products because the developers were never forced to sit down and say, finish this product. They move from one partnership, create a product here, and today I don't like the code, so I'm going. Then go somewhere else. And that is part of our Achilles heel. And I think for us, knowing the difference between the pitch and running a business is something that we're still making that transition, but we're going in the right direction anyway. But
So we don't want to be, and we don't want to look as if we are on the developers
side,
side now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a general conversation. That should tell you how hubs have been very instrumental, because even till now, it hasn't got into the heads of people, especially younger people starting startups. I mean, because you are the lead developer, because you are the business, it doesn't mean, no, you are better than anyone. Everyone plays a key role, and that is why I think hubs are important. And in the journey of hubs, how did governments, NGOs play a role? Because this started specifically from a private side without government interventions. So when did government come in? How did they play a role? When did NGOs come in?
The NGOs have kind of always been there one way or the other. They've supported programs, particularly in 2016 when we saw the boom of the gender agenda. Right? So promoting girls to code and all of these other things. And so a lot of the NGOs funded these programs to ensure that, people were teaching women how to code, or people with disability or marginalized communities and whatnot to code. So we focused on coding, not anything else. So that's where they came in. Government really came in at a tail end from, let's say, 2018-ish, right? But when they came in through NEIP, where NEIP, which is a National Entrepreneurship Innovation Program, where they came into the hub space was mainly through entrepreneurship. So again, with them, they came in where they had, let's say, somebody that wants to be a farmer. Then they send them to the hubs, and then the hubs will train them on business skills and whatnot. A lot of the hubs, I mean, when you look at iSpace, because we were tech focused, we look at ways in which to wrap technology around what you do anyway. So even if we were selling pigs, we were looking at ways in which we can make you tech, enabled, whether to create a mobile app. I don't know why most people wanted to create apps at that time, but that was the conversation, right? And so that's how government came in. I think one of the major game, I don't even want to say a bad move, but one of the major things that government did, which was a bit, was when ADC was created, right? You had Accra Digital Center. Because then what happened was then the bigger funding organizations like the World Banks and everything else pulled resources into the government spaces, right? So then that meant the private sector didn't get funding to open hubs and all of these other things.
Doesn't ADC disperse these resources to the hubs?
No, because ADC just became a whole bigger space where a lot of the people that we've trained all then ended up in those spaces. Because now when you find that when I go to ADC, for example, you see people that, where iSpace babies, literally, you're here, you're here. But then when you come to iSpace, the place will be empty unless you're doing an event. But then these are people that we train. And so that relationship between government and private sector has always been a dicey one. Now, from a business point of view, their existence is key. Because we need government as a stakeholder in everything that we do. However, how we then manage that relationship is a different conversation. And government naturally creating that space, I get why they will create a space, because if World Bank is going to give you X amount of money to have a space for you to do that with, then it makes sense for you to do it. Where we also need to look at the synergy or the partnership is how do we get private sector people who have experience in doing these things to run it, right? And I think this is where the government also came in a good way, where they decided, for some reason, to put out a bid for the local organizations to kind of run hubs on behalf of the government. So out of that, it was myself. At that time, you had iSpace make a bid, MDF and InnoHub and Kumasi Hive, right? So we all sent our proposal in, and then we went for a meeting, right? And when we went for the meeting, I think I was new to this whole government tender thing, right? And so again, they asked for a document, and I openly said, I don't have that document, so rule me out of it, right? Like openly, in front of everybody. I'm like, I don't have this document, I have everything else, but I don't have this document, so rule me out of it. And then we saw that there was a clause in there that said that you had to, for you to bid for the contract, you had to raise, $2 million in revenue for you to do that, to run the hub. And so the conversation among the people there was like, wait, no hub in Ghana has $2 million. Has that
I mean, you're more or less an NGO.
Exactly, right? So I kind of leveraged on the contact that I had in communications, Ministry of Communication at that time, so spoke to Deputy Minister and told him, listen, exit this thing because it's not going to work, right? And then the conversation then moved on to InnoHub and Kumasi Hive coming together to form a consortium for them to bid, and that's how GTL came about. So then GTL, then being a government entity, was run by private sector, right? And then Ghana Innovation Hub also came about through that, and then that was also run by MDF. So in that sense, where government played a very great role is they were able to pull in the funds, but realize that they can't run it themselves, so then got the private sector guys to do it, which for me was a great move for them to do. So I think that's where they came in, realizing that they have a huge stakeholder role to play, but they did not want to become the implementers and then partner with private sector for that to happen. So hence how GTL and Ghana Innovation Hub came about.
Well, this.
I have a little question around GTL.
Okay.
I speak to a number of people.
It's already like
I speak to a number of people around, GTL. We know they are visibly almost everywhere.
Yeah.
And they run a lot of programs, and it's very loud. And I mean, let me be blunt. For most of the programs they run, they are like a number of weeks, let's say 8 weeks, become a software developer, run a startup, and after that they do a startup summit, and then they pitch these ideas. If I'm not being mischievous, sometimes you go into their YouTube pages, you see all the pitches, and then probably maybe you visit the websites of those pitches, and you realize there's no product. I know you already mentioned it, but how do you feel about, I mean, hubs are supposed to be doing a lot more, building an ecosystem, not just building, in my words, a show. So what do you think about how as a pioneer of this whole ecosystem, one of the pioneers of this whole ecosystem, how does that make you feel?
I mean, it makes me feel very angry. And because of that, I mean, the thought process that you have I've been blackballed already anyway, right? Most people don't work with me because I have that view, like you said. So if you watch iSpace carefully, you will realize that none of the funding agencies has ever worked with iSpace before.
I've noticed that.
Right? None.
Yeah.
And because I'm very strict on how you run programs, you can't be a developer in 8 weeks. It's almost like saying that I am supposed to be a surgeon, and I realize, okay, so when did you qualify? 2 weeks ago. You're going to come here? No way. Right? And so if you're a good businessman, I mean, okay, so we in the studio right now. Typical example, if the engineer here, if I said to somebody, or the engineer, I said, okay, I can train somebody to be a sound engineer in 3 days. I'm sure he would probably, right now, if it wasn't the fact that he wants to get sued, he would have just thrown something on my head. Because this is something...
What do you think?
Right. You see what I mean?
His whole lifetime doing this.
Do this, right. This is something that some people go to universities for. Get PhD for years.
Yeah, for years.
Right?
For years,
But because a lot of the programs that were run in the past were ticking boxes programs. Right? What you happen is people just design a program, and because they have to meet a certain criteria or whatever, so we just run the programs through as quickly as possible. And I think that's where the problem comes with hubs, where we are not saying that, hold on a second, we are trying to build skill sets. We're trying to build businesses. In the real world, a graphic designer would not just learn Figma and all of these other things in 3 months and you call them an expert. It doesn't work. They have a knowledge of it, but they're not an expert. So a lot of these programs, I'm not surprised that you go online and you find that there's nothing there, because the initial program was never meant to create a product. It was literally meant for publicity's sake. We just do the program and then say we've done it and then thank you very much, right? Because, I mean, even if you look at MESS, for example, some of your colleagues that you went in the incubation thing, some of them just died off real quickly, right? And even the ones that got funding, you had to get a lot of support for that to happen. And so imagine in the real world, where a lot of the funding mechanisms are not there. A lot of the skill set, the mentors that you guys had in MESS wasn't there, and all of these other things. See, so I'm not surprised that the likes of the GTLs, because even with iSpace, we've done that. And where you've done programs where you're now chasing people, right, to say, hold on, we gave you money. Where's the product? Right? Where's the product? Why didn't you have to? So then Josiah then gets a bad name, or Josiah's harsh, Josiah's this, Josiah's calling us. It's because, dude, I gave you money to create a product that you didn't do. So what are you telling me? And that is the problem that we have in the ecosystem. So I'm not going to sit here and act like we all angels. Most of the programs are designed not to create products.
So I think I've worked with some of these hubs before. I think the problem maybe stems a little bit further than the hubs itself. You know, there are donor partners that, you know, expect you to, they give you money and expect you to produce results. Some of them, if you don't produce results, they take back the money. They also have like their higher, you know,
people that they have
rich
to report
people
to.
that they have to report to. So I think that's where the problem stems from, because some of people, it's like they're just crunching numbers. Okay, we've trained this XYZ number, and some of them will use it to feed into their foundation. Some of them might get tax breaks from it. So I think the problem stands further than that, but I think we should, you know, maybe the hub should be much more stand on their feet and say, nah, what you're asking from me it's not possible, right? When I was in MEST, y'all could attest, we were asked to create a product in a few days, a few weeks. Some of them,
6 weeks.
some of them, I think some of these programs are trying to push you to your limits, but also sometimes it just doesn't work. So I think it's up to the hub to stand on your feet and say what you're trying to do. Even we had software engineering background and all, and taking people who have no background in software engineering or anything, try to train them in a couple of months. I think maybe the hubs have to stand on their feet and say no, what you're asking of us, it's not possible.
Yeah, and I hope that topic also comes back up again so that we can discuss why some hubs can't do that.
If we are being frank, most of the hubs are no hubs without the programs.
Right.
Exactly.
So most of the hubs exist for the programs.
Yeah.
So when there's a program, there's a hub. When there's no program, there's no hub.
Right.
How does that make you feel?
Yeah, as the head of or the chairperson for the hubs in Ghana, it's problematic. So we've gone through situations where we're trying to standardize hubs and make sure that you have these things in place. So you have a physical space, you have programs, you have a community before we even flag you up. And again, this is where the GTL problem came in, right? Where because they needed to tick boxes, train X amount of people over time, blah, 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 it then meant that, I can get my friend to set up a hub. I'll give you money to open a space right?
Yeah.
And that's where the problem comes from. And then also, and I'm glad you mentioned the fact that a lot of these donor agencies, again, they were very particular in the zones in which they implement programs.
Yeah.
So they will come and say, we want to do an agricultural program, but we want to only look at the Ashanti region. So if you were in Accra and you think to yourself, I want this money, that's $50,000 or euros on the table, but I'm not getting it because I'm in Accra. I'm going to just open a space in Kumasi somewhere.
Yeah.
And then, so now you saw the cluster of hubs around because the money was on the table.
Yep.
And so after the program is done, there's no hub, mainly because there's no sustainability plan and everything else in place to say that we are actually running hubs. And the thing about running a hub is the individual that is actually the head of the hub has to have at least run businesses, failed businesses, to be in place to then support entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But most of us were not in that position, right?
Yeah.
See, so if somebody's saying, in order for you to do this program, you need to have a physical space, X amount of tables, and a laptop, and then a projector, and I'll give you $50,000. Homeboy, you will do it. You take it. You take it. And I think that's where a lot of the problems comes from. So it's not just the hub founders alone. They just saw an opportunity and then decided, okay, since you're going to give me money, I'm just going to rent out the space. And even if after 3 years or whatever, there's no program, most of them were also running their own businesses anyway.
Yeah.
So they needed a space to run their businesses from. So the hub space, the training space became a byproduct of the space itself. So some of them, again, and I think, my Ghanaian entrepreneurs are going to kill me for this. I think in Ghana, we don't have entrepreneurs. We have hustlers. Right? We have hustlers.
What's great in that?
So, because the environment is not conducive.
Yeah.
Right? The environment is not conducive. See, so where you have people doing galamsey, they do this, they do that. And again, let me use sound engineering as an example. For you to record music and soundtrack and all of these other things, it's different skill sets.
Yeah.
But then if you have a sound engineer that can say, okay, yeah, I could come on your movie set and then record for you. Then I can bring you to the studio and then record for you. And I can bring an orchestra together. You need to stand and be like, whoa, hold on a second. You one person, you could do all of these things?
Yeah.
Right? And this is where we find ourselves. Because we have a situation where wherever the money is, the person's just going to take it and then do whatever. So they were just hustlers. We were never entrepreneurs. Because if we were, we would have built in sustainability plan. As in, after this, what happens next? But if I'm just hustling, because right now I want to be a developer. Most of the guys were technical people, and then they think to themselves, listen, if somebody's going to give me money just to hop in a space and get people to pitch and I get paid for me to then feed myself, of course. But they didn't think about, okay, but we need to have programs for the hub itself. And after I pitch, then what? Am I going to teach them how to launch a product, how to even think about intellectual property and all of these things? That's what hubs are supposed to do.
Yeah.
But because we were running as hustlers, somebody's going to pay me to just do a project. I wasn't passionate about doing the thing. I'm just going to just get the money and just move on. And that's what it is. And itself is not a bad thing, but where the problem comes in the expectations. Because you said you were a hub, so we expected you to have A, B, C, and D, and then now you don't. And then the problem comes in, oh, this hub is not doing this, or these hubs are not capable of doing that, or Ghana hubs, the ecosystem is not credible because we had a lot of people that were just creating hubs for the sake of just making money, not because they actually thought, from an entrepreneurial point of view, we're creating a community to support an individual to create a business, right? And that's where the problem is.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not going to get you guys in trouble.
No.
We want trouble.
That's it.
We want trouble, as he said. So, I mean, in all this, how has iSpace stood different? What are some of your success stories? How have you contributed to the Ghanaian tech ecosystem? Yeah.
I think we've been able to kind of separate ourselves from the noise, really, because of leadership, how we determine what it is that we want to do, right? Because for me, I realized that growing up in the UK had this advantage because, again, working in the corporate world earlier made me understand that business is not a joke.
Yeah.
Business is like a Pandora box. You open this and you find out this, you go in here and you're thinking, whoa, I didn't know this, I need to do that.
Yeah.
And
Tell
so
me about that.
working with the entrepreneurs, I literally bypassed developers. So you come into the space and you're a developer, yes, you can learn how to code and everything else, but I was really working with the business people. And so when you come into iSpace, when we run a program like when we did Unlocking Women in Technologies, our program was for a year. It wasn't 3 weeks, 3 months. It's literally for a whole year. So you go through learning how to code for a whole year, and then you're also learning the business side of things and business development and all of that. And learning how to pitch is entirely different from getting the money, right? And then ensuring that you implement what it is that you're supposed to implement and running a business are two different things. And so for us, where we've been able to kind of stay ahead, quote unquote, or whatever ahead means, is just ensure that from my point of view, I'm always learning on how to even be a better, founder. And my team, I'm always training my team. I've taken, I think, about 3 or 4 years off, literally focusing on my team alone. I don't engage. I don't go out to go and seek funding for anything. It's just my team development every single time because I realized that was the missing pieces. And you can't train an entrepreneur to run a business when you yourself, you can't even run your own entity. So I think that's where iSpace is kind of being relevant and also helping other hubs, right? It's been always our thing to work with hubs. So for me, it's been helping hubs train their staff and build their capacity and everything else because I'm more focused on that. And I think it also stems from a more patriotic point of view because when you speak to the Nigerians and South Africans and Kenyans, you hear that they focus on business.
Yeah.
Right? They focus on business. Whereas in Ghana, we love individuals. One person's doing this, hey, because we want to be like that person.
Yeah.
Whereas when you look at Nigeria, the business side is what makes them the way they are. So that's where we focused on. So when you talk about success stories, the likes of Farmerline, seeing where Farmerline is right now, we were one of the first people to get them funding because of introductions that we introduced. I think they got about 10,000 pounds or whatever for one of their first when they first came out. So we were able to facilitate that for them, and then to see that growth that they've come through, it's an amazing thing for us. And even to the point where iSpace were able to co-sign Hyperspace in Kumasi, getting funding for them to start off their hub was something that we did, right? And when we did Unlocking Women in Technologies, rather than go to a lot of these regions to implement programs, we gave money to the likes of Grassroots, even Kumasi Hive and all of these other, to run programs on our behalf, right? So again, when you talk about trustees, farms, we've got Sabari Tours and all of these other people, we then raise funds for them. Sabari Tours is a tourism startup that looking at making tourism an attractive thing for people in local Ghana really to be able to see what Ghana is about. So for us, it's a bit of helping the bigger guys and also doing what do you call it, the non-sexy thing, training hubs and all of these other things. And funny enough, one of the things I would say I'm really glad we did was even ZPay. We did a program. This is it 1877 or 19? One of those numbers. It was a program that we did that we had Zacol and all of these other people. And ZPay, Andrew, I accompanied him all the way to Washington to do a pitch. Unfortunately, he didn't win, but it was just testament to what it is that we do, right? So you don't necessarily have to be part of our community for us to support you. It's just the fact that you're part of the ecosystem. So I think that's what makes iSpace different in that sense. We don't only focus on our people, but people externally, we just help them that way.
Yeah, I mean, this is amazing. I would have expected like just to hear startups, and that would have been it. But mention the fact that I mean you help co-sign like Hyperspace to receive funding, start their spaces, and companies that are now mature like the Family and the ZP, and they didn't necessarily have to even be like in your niched community or like that. It's interesting to hear that. Personally, I worked with a company in Hyperspace for almost a year, and I saw
which company is
Hyperspace
this?
in the initial stages and where they are now.
Right.
And knowing that, I mean, somebody had to offer a helping hand to them is significant. With the impact they are now having in like Kumasi, it's amazing. So it's nice to hear that. I hope you continue supporting the whole ecosystem.
We have to. Because innovation right now is a serious thing.
Yep.
And the hubs play a huge role. But as to what the next phase will be, God knows. Do we then kind of look at ways into reducing the number of hubs that we have across the various regions by standardization to ensure that you meet this standard, you do this, and then you go through certification. And I think that's what Ghana Hubs Network is doing, really. A lot of the programs that we run in, once you go through the programs, we then give you certification so that everybody knows that you've been trained in X, Y, and Z in order for you to be able to support the entrepreneur, because you cannot work with entrepreneurs when you don't even know what it's like to be an entrepreneur.
So, just to know, how was Ghana's Hubs Network set up? What's the support from is there any support from the government? Is there like legislative instruments backing them? How is it set up?
So we don't have like a legal backing. We just have self-governing by the hubs itself. And how that was even set up was a strange thing. We all came together, I think, 2017. And the conversation was around the fact that Accra was getting a lot of the support when it comes to hubs and blah, blah, blah. How do we then ensure the smaller hubs, quote unquote, come together and get the same support? So that's where Ghana Hubs Network came about, right? Was literally formed to support other hubs outside of the major regions. And our work really is to ensure that hubs get the support that they need, mainly because when funding was done, if it's not MEST, if it's not Hyperspace, if it's not Hopping Academy, if it's not iSpace, if it's not Impact Hub, then nobody got the support. And the smaller hubs were trying their best because remember, some of the smaller hubs were actually responding to community needs more so than the bigger hubs were. And they not surviving, so how do we then help them survive? Then we came in with building their capacity. So the Ghana Hubs Network really is focused on building capacity of hubs as opposed to competing with hubs. So our role working with government is to ensure that, again, we have this policy thing that we're working on, the Ghana Startup Act that we're working on. And that came about because Ghana Hubs Network did a 25 days tour around the nation. We got on a bus, 25 days around the various regions. And a lot of the things that came out was access to funding, access to market, infrastructure, the gender issue, investment, and all of these things were things that a lot of the entrepreneurs were talking about. And so the idea was, okay, so how do we then push that to government to tell government that, listen, people are doing amazing things in these very regions, but you talking about after, but they can't get access to even their own local market. How does that work? They can't get, funding and all of these other things. How is that going to work? And I think that's where we then will work with government when it comes to policy, but we don't have like a legal backing to say government supports us to do this. We gonna govern ourselves, so to speak. And we've done enough work now that the government now is working with the network to work with innovation hubs and stuff. So yeah.
Okay. So, want to know how is it governed? What's the governance structure like?
The governance structure at the moment, we have the board, and the board also reports to a council. The council is made up of all the hub founders. So basically, when you become a hub founder and you become part of our membership, you are then part of the council. So they then oversee what the board does. But then we also have a secretariat, which is independent of the board. So they run the daily programs and partnerships, affairs, and everything else. The board just comes in to make sure that we work on the strategic side of things. So we have three arms. We have the secretariat, we have the board, and then we have the council that kind of runs us in that sense.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned the startup acts. How is it supposed to address these challenges that the hubs faces?
Great question. So the way it's looking at it is when you look at the investment side, I think there was a point in time where you had to have like $250,000 for you to invest in a startup in Ghana. We are talking to government to remove that.
As a foreign investor.
As a foreign investor, because then I have to bring 250 before I even invest in a startup in Ghana. And it just didn't make sense because it's getting in the way of, it becomes a bottleneck for investment. So we speaking to them on that. And then when it comes to even setting up local funding mechanisms, right? Because we have to understand that the way investment works, it shouldn't really apply to Africa. But for some reason, we are moving on to that space of angel investors and VCs and all of these other things. I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody in my family that would give me $5,000 to $10,000 when I started businesses, right? But we talk about angel investors, and so we are talking to government and saying that we need a sort of fund that supports entrepreneurs. Now, this fund can run across the value chain in terms of grants and then angel investors and then VC and all of these other things. So from the initial stage, from the ideation stage, let the grants and all of these people fund that. And then from the prototyping and incubation space, let the angel investors fund that. Now, from the scaling or acceleration space, that's when we look at the VCs and all of these other things. Because when you go to a VC and a VC is telling you, oh, I'm only looking at tickets between $500,000. Now you think, but who's going to give me the starting block before I get exactly, right? And it got to a point where people were kind of bashing startups that were going for grants. And I'm telling you, missing the point. The grants are needed in the initial stage. We just have to guide it. So this is where the policy, the Startup Act is looking at, and even with gender. And when we talk about gender, it's not just focused on women alone, because some organizations, you might have more women than have men. And what does that mean? So we're trying to emphasize that when we talk about gender, people shouldn't think it's just women alone. And then when we talk about people with disability and people from marginalized backgrounds and all of that, again, that policy is aiming at that to ensure that women-led startups are getting better support. Startups that are led by people with disability or from marginalized backgrounds are also getting support. The diaspora funds can also be used as a mechanism to fund startups. Why that is important, Ghana and the diaspora is linked, whether we like it or not. But what we tend to find is somebody will send money home for houses to be built, they're building a house or to go to school and all of these other things. How do we then kind of channel that funding to also encourage diasporans to fund startups? So that's a lot of the things that the policy aims to speak at, how to support the local entrepreneur through investment and people with disability, the gender, access to market. Again, you might have a great product in Ghana, but it's booming in Ghana, but it could do very well in Kenya. How do we then ensure that we get you the access to that market without having to go through all the red tapes? So that's what the Startup Act is really looking at solving, really.
At what stage is the Startup Act? When are we expecting it to become law?
In the real world, I'll probably say by the end of this year, because again, with elections happening, we're hoping that somebody will pick it up and run with it, do a whole Usain Bolt with it and make the thing happen. But where we are right now is we've done the whole stakeholder engagement, we've spoken to people, we've got feedback and everything else. And then we gave it to MOC. They're interested in it.
MOC?
The Ministry of Communication, right? They're interested in it. And the Ministry of Finance is also interested in it. And then MESTI is also interested in it. So there's a positive energy for the act itself. As to who is going to lead it, that's where we are at the moment. So we're discussing with the various agencies who's going to walk this particular document to Parliament and then get our senators and whatnot to look at it and then say, okay, this is something that we're going to pass into law. And I think this is where we will need the likes of you guys.
Yeah.
We need you to go on Twitter and then tweet at me, Josiah, JK Eyison on Twitter across. I asked it, what the hell is happening with the Startup Act,
Sure.
right? Then we can tell you where we are with it.
Yeah.
All right, and then we tag MOC, we tag all of these other people for them to know that on the grassroots, people actually want it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, believe it or not, and I think that's one thing that our government, whether you like it or not, and I'm not here to promote anybody, what they do very well on both sides is they follow social media.
Yeah.
They listen to what the people are saying. And right now, because they're not getting the buzz, they think, okay, it's not important. But then when you guys really start asking questions, the average person, because we even had to go through a stage of defining what a startup is. And that took a long time for that to be done, right?
Wow.
And so this is where we are. The documents and everything else is packaged. 3 agencies, the ministries are interested in it as to who's going to lead on that to take it to the next level. That's where we are at the moment. But yeah, we are almost there. We're almost there. I don't want to say this year so that, if it doesn't happen, you start stoning me on the street. But, we are making, inroads on that to hopefully, because of the elections, somebody will use that as a means to kind of, entice votes one way or the other.
Okay, great.
Talking about elections and politics, this is it's not too related to what we are doing, but Nigeria's Digital and Communications Minister.
Yeah, Bosun.
Yeah,
That's my guy.
Yeah, used to be someone in the tech ecosystem, and is now in politics.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I love it, but it will never happen in Ghana. It will never happen in Ghana.
Why not?
Because Ghanaians by nature, we self-sacrifice for the greater good, right? And even if you look at the way Bosun got into power or into administration, he criticized government a lot. But then when government came into power, they realized that you can't do anything without this guy. So then they brought him into play. In Ghana, who speaks like Bosun? Nobody. I could do it, but they hate me already anyway. So there's no point in even going there, right? And I don't affiliate myself in politics in that, so to speak. So we don't have an out-and-out person that we can say that is the person that we all should rally behind and make things happen, right? And I think that's why it's not going to happen. And it's a shame because if any of these things should have happened, it should have actually happened in Ghana first before anything else, because we are the Black Stars, right? we know how to be forward-thinking and all of these other things. So I'm hoping that because of these elections and everything coming up, some names being spoken about it, okay, how do we then get a counterpart as this person? Because right now, when you look at what Bosun is doing, man, all the agencies are now talking to Nigeria, and taking pictures here and there. And that's what we should have somebody that's doing digital and entrepreneurship should be doing, right? And again, it's not like we copying them, but we can fine tune their system right now to do what it is that we need to do. So for me, if the opportunity ever came that any party said, Josiah, going to do it, hell, I'm going to do it. Because straight away, I'm going to do it. Because I believe in the power of innovation for development. And I'm outspoken, so it's not a case of I'm going to be bought by anybody because I've already done this anyway. So all it is you giving us a bigger platform for us to do what it is that we're going to do. But as for Josiah to go and say, oh, hello, get me, no, it's not going to happen. But if they called me and said, okay, we need you to do, even at the lower level, I would do it because we need that done, right? We really need that done because we need to be competitive. So we need a position like that for that to happen.
So if you're listening, we are talking about the role of hubs in the Ghanaian tech ecosystem, not just to startups, even like when you consider careers as well. So that's all what the conversation has been, and that's what we are still discussing. But as we come come closer to an end, if there were 3 key things you probably want to get fixed by maybe the next the next government, let's say in the next 4 years, 2024 past, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, what would be the 3 concerns for you if you think Ghanaian tech ecosystem should be built? When you consider hubs, what would be the top 3 concerns for you?
The top 3 would be capacity building in terms of the resources and human resources that's needed to run these hubs, right? Because that would make us competitive.
Yeah.
A lot of the hubs, funny enough, don't even have innovation managers. You're an innovation hub, but you don't have an innovation manager, right? And that's a skill set that we don't have in our ecosystem, right? So that's one of the key things, like capacity building across the board on how best hubs can be equipped to support entrepreneurs. And that's one key thing. Funding. The government doesn't have to give us money, but they need to open the space for us to be able to then compete for for us to get the money that is needed for us to then create great programs, pay our people well for them to stay, so that we can get that industry knowledge being kept in the spaces, because hubs, generally, people that work for hubs move from one space to the other.
Yeah.
So that means that the entrepreneurship space itself is not a good space to be in.
Yeah.
Right? And then for me, policy. We cannot develop without policy framework. And they need to create a conducive environment for us to operate in. As to what that means, infrastructure, funding, anything to do with literally encouraging even academia to work with the innovation hubs. Because students go to school for 4 years.
Yeah.
When they come out, what happens? Why don't we have a partnership between academia and the private sector innovation hubs to then take on these projects that some of these guys are working on in universities already anyway, and then government will back that up through a lot of the funding mechanisms that they can be able to pull together. And one last thing, I know you mentioned 3, but one last thing, government, please, you have a lot of empty buildings, right? Empty buildings. Why not, conduct a whole assessment on it, and then we see where these buildings are. And then rather than us being paying private landlords, we can pay you, the government. You make money out of it. We can then use those buildings to run our businesses. It will ensure sustainability straight away for us. And then you, government, also make money because we pay you rent at the back end. And then employ people. And then we could just move in unison. So just audit your empty buildings and then see what hubs can do, and then support creatives as well. Right? Like really support creatives, because when you look at the Nigerian ecosystem, creatives bring awareness to a nation.
Yeah.
Because people then look at the nation because, oh, wow, music is coming out of there. Film is coming out of there. What else is there? And so we need to support creators. Ghana, I don't think we have even a hub that supports creatives anyway. And that's something that we need to look into. So for me, those are the things that I would really say government needs to support the ecosystem with.
I think those are really thoughtful and insightful. Especially the one on the buildings is very simple but practical.
Most of the buildings from the collapsed
every
banks,
region.
some are still existing,
exactly.
and they are still empty.
Yeah. And there's always like some empty government office in every region. Every region, some unoccupied government office. So if you can even start from that would be a good step to take. And we are grateful for that. So Josiah, thank you so much.
I have to.
You have to.
I call them unnecessary questions.
Unnecessary questions. But so I want to thank you for ending the real part of the show. Let the few unnecessary questions come in, then we share the opportunity.
The first thing is, I know a lot of people who went through iSpace and are doing different things now. Just name one of them that you are very proud of. What
As in terms of employee or
employee? Let's start with
employee.
Employee.
So employee-wise, I think it has to be an accountant. So her name is Asumdre Peace. So yeah, I would definitely say her because now she's infusing tech into accountancy. So she's now built a system where other smaller organizations can then... So she's almost like QuickBooks.
Okay.
But then she learned the tech and then applied the skills that she already had. And then now she's doing what she's doing. So yeah, I'm really...
What's the name of her company?
I will get you that.
Okay.
I'll get you that. I always seem to forget.
We'll add that to the last one is... I think you have a unique way of choosing where your next office will be. I don't know if you know it, but the first office was in Osu. Osu, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And then you moved to Spinktest.
To Laboni.
To Spinktest. And then you are now in East Legon.
Yeah.
Is there a science behind it?
No. No. It was, you see, because the thing is, yes, this is science, madness, this is like a method to my madness, right? Because when we were in Osu, because you had ADC and then Impact Hub, it just made sense to pull out of the space because they were already, and Osu was very bougie.
Yeah.
Right, like, and I'm a grassroots person. I want to be with those developers that will come in and sleep at the space and don't want to leave, and right, and that was what I could do, right. And then when you look at Spintex was never a space where anybody had a hub over there, but yet a lot of our programs, you had people coming all the way from there to that space, and then with being here is because I'm the chairperson for the network. A lot of the major hubs are already here. So having to meet with them, I didn't want them to come all the way to Spintex to come and meet me before they start saying that I think I'm an overlord of the space. So I decided to come to them instead. And I think being in this space as well is kind of teaching me a lot. About the tech ecosystem because we're closer to MEST. We're just like about 10 minutes away from MEST and all of these other things. So we need to kind of build that community. So I think that's what is doing for me. Ideally, I would love to move out of Accra. Mainly because I think the other regions are doing amazing things, right? I want to challenge myself. So Takwa, particularly with climate change and all of these other, Takrady and all of these other things. And talk about Takrady, shout out to, and rest in peace to our brother Smart. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. God has his plans. But iCode, we are looking at ways in which we're going to support iCode, mainly from iSpace and also Ghana Hubs Network, to ensure that the legacy still stays and then do what it is that they need to do. So maybe you see me around that region a lot. But yeah, I'm moving around really was because I'm responding to the need of that community at that moment in time. I hope that answered your question.
Cool.
All right, so thank you once again, Josiah.
Thank you for
Just
having me.
I mean, do you have any upcoming programs at iSpace?
We have a team building. So one of the things that iSpace is doing now is focusing more on the teams that work for entrepreneurs. I don't want to deal with entrepreneurs anymore. Mainly because your Achilles heel is always going to be your team. And so looking at ways in which we can help you build the capacity of your team. So we have a program coming on, I think, the 12th and the 13th of February. I'm looking at team building. So if you're interested, again, check www.ispacefoundation.com. And then you get all the details that you want. Sign up your team for them to understand what your vision, mission, and all of these things are before they even, embark on creating a product. And then working for you so they don't quit and then leave you in the midst of things, or you fire them because they're not doing what you think they're supposed to do. So that's the thing that we focused on right now.
All right, thank you, Josiah. So I mean, as you have seen, iSpace is key about building successful businesses, not just,
Crunching
numbers and building pitchpreneurs. The days of pitchpreneurs are over. Now we are in the season of builders. So be encouraged to build. iSpace has been in existence for a decade, and we are glad to, testify of that here. Subscribe to the Building Bites podcast on YouTube and Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others. So wish you all the best. See you another time.